on the architecture world. Some previous ones, architects that have done this is Marcus Patton, Jessica and McGarry and Stephen Moon of McGarry Moon, Kieran Mackle and James Greaves. I've also done a talk, so I know what it's like. John, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the meeting today. John was a president almost 30 years ago of the RSUA from 96 to 98. Just to put that in context, John, I started at Queen's University in 1996, and that's when my architecting started. And John is a former CEO of the health estates and a wealth of knowledge about improving procurement practices in capital projects. John was awarded a CBE in 2013 for his contribution to the development of health infrastructure. And outside of Northern Ireland, John led the Cole Report, which was an independent inquiry into the construction of schools in Edinburgh, and contributed to the Industry Safety Steering Group, which was established after the following of Grenfell tragedy in 2018. We're looking very much forward to hearing from you, John. So the screen is yours.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Some faces I recognise, some names I don't. I see Clive there. Clive goes back even earlier than you were talking about, John, there, and membership of the RSUA. So some old timers there. Now I still feel as young as I was when I was president of the RSUA 30 years ago. And I'm still working away. People find that hard to believe, but I'm as busy as ever I was, and I've reached the fine age of 73. So I'm still at it. I'm going to talk to you today about my career. I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing currently, because there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment, and I'm involved in a new hospital in Dublin, a paediatric hospital, which you know is now been overrun by 2 years, and a number of other major projects at the moment that aren't really, I think, of interest. And I'm going to more focus on what I did in earlier years and try and show you that there's not just one route through architecture, and that there's different directions one can take. So I'm going to share my screen now and start a presentation. Just get rid of that. Right. I assume you can see that?
Yep, perfect.
Right, okay. Right, well, as I say here, it's a glimpse through an unexpected career journey as an architect. It's not the traditional route by any means, although traditional route may have different connotations in Northern Ireland. Now this picture of Victor up there, because in my first year at university, having finished off a project and run round to get prints of it to put up for a crit, I arrived at Windsor Photoprints on Eglinton Avenue and saw this gleaming Porsche outside the door. And as I walked in, I heard this rich voice booming out. And there, standing in all his splendour, talking to the guys, was Victor in his, I think it was a grey-green corduroy suit and a white scarf around his neck and holding a meerschaum pipe and the hair flowing. And to me, that was what I thought a successful architect looked like. And it was what a successful architect looked like, because Victor was a very successful architect and a very good designer. And I thought, I'm going to be like that one day. But that never really happened. I did get a corduroy suit at one stage, but that was as close as I got to following Victor. And this looks like a strange slide to show, but a couple of years later, one of my friends who was doing architecture at Queen's with me had a nervous breakdown, quite a serious nervous breakdown, and he was admitted to the then acute psychiatric unit in one of the old buildings on part of the Belfast City Hospital estate. And I visited him, and I was shocked when I went into the building. Now, these are photographs from America in 1946. The bed spacing wasn't much dissimilar to that on the right, and they were full of patients in various stages of distress. My poor friend was lying there absolutely terrified, not just of the condition he found himself in, but where he was, and the noises and the sounds and the potential shrieks and violence that was going on in the ward. And I know that he was not getting any help out of that environment. And perhaps that what made me eventually decide, when I finished qualification, to join the Department of Health to design health buildings. So what I'm going to talk about is not the first phase, of which is when I was in the drawing office designing buildings with the rest of the guys, because a lot of the work was done in-house in those days. But as I moved up, which happened quite quickly through the organisation, I took more and more responsibility. The four areas of my focus, you could say, were on improving design quality, as I felt that design quality was not at the level that it needed to be. Looking at procurement, because I felt the procurement methods that were being used didn't facilitate good design, and trying to make sure we could get the best designers doing the best designs. The strategic planning of health facilities, because we're still just building and replacing old buildings, but not actually thinking about where they ought to be and what they need to look like. And then the last phase of since 2016, effectively, as John mentioned, has been a focus of my career on build safety and quality, as well as on the other areas. So I'm going to take you through those briefly, not at long length. First of all, the design quality, the focus I tried to bring to that. I realized that I wasn't a brilliant designer, but I do feel that I have a good eye for good design. I know good design when I see it, and poor design when I see it. And I felt it has to be allowed to happen. And I felt that procurement processes increasingly didn't allow it to happen. So you have to build a system which allows the architects to really be as creative as they can be. This is Roger Ulrich. I worked with Roger many times and lectured at conferences with him in different places around the world. And the view from a window may influence recovery from surgery. I thought that was a very important point, and that drove a lot of the work that I did all the way through. This was research he did at Texas University. And what they found in the research was that daylight in health buildings led to shorter lengths of stay, and people got home quicker. They had less need for pain-killing drugs when they were there. Again, another saving to the exchequer and a better outcome for patients. It reduced pain and stress in people, and that the lack of daylight actually led to potentially depression and increased stress among both staff and patients. And I think it's pretty obvious. And it wasn't the first person who said this, and this is Louis Kahn, the great architect. The sun never knew how great it was until it hit the side of a building, and a room is not a room without natural light. And those were things that really we needed to drive home in relation to our health buildings. And quite often you find in designs that people filled up every space, including the end of corridors, so that you couldn't see out, you didn't get views, you didn't get light. And that was one of the things that in most of the critics I did with architects, I immediately removed rooms that were blocking lights and views and protected the daylight. And Louis Kahn wasn't first. Florence Nightingale said it in her notes on nursing in 1859. Deficiency of light, deficiency of ventilation, deficiency of space are all effect on patients. And she said the first requirement in the hospital is that it should do no harm. And certainly I felt that my colleague I referred to at the start, when I saw in the psychiatric unit in the Belfast City Hospital, the building was actually doing him harm. And she also said colour and the materials around us actually have a physical effect on how we feel. This is a brief excerpt from a report, RIB report 1933, which is identifying probably for the first time the importance of light, fresh air and light and sunshine in the heating process. And this is a slide of the Pymeo Sanatorium by Albert Alto in 1929 to 33. And there's a more modern picture of a beautiful building. I've been there. And of course, he designed all the furniture, lightings, and everything else in the building. But light was the dominant factor, open balconies for wards. And I've thrown this picture in just because you easily feel depressed as soon as you see something like this, which is an area which was, nothing to offer to the person. So our environment does impact on how we feel. You don't feel good walking down streets like that, no matter what sort of a mood you're in. And I feel you don't feel great walking down streets like this. Most hospitals at the time had this double-loaded, artificially lit corridors. And again, light didn't get in, there are no views out, and certainly not an environment that would help healing. And this is a slide by Henry Marsh, who's a neurosurgeon, again, somebody I've known for some time. And he was reacting to a PFI hospital that he had been forced to move into, and that the windows were positions that none of the staff could actually see out, views over London, but they couldn't actually see them. And I think that's, again, just a factor about, elevation's been done to look good from the outside, potentially, but not thinking about what's happening on the inside. And this is what you can do. This is the Rikshospitalet in Oslo that I visited a couple of times. And they really did do a street in the middle of the hospital, which actually, was vibrant, and you could see this lifting the spirits as opposed to depressing them. More slides of that hospital. And again, just warmth, quality, lighting, landscape brought into the streets. Really a lovely experience to be in there, even though it's a hospital where you don't want to be at all. But so we need to make it better places. And this is Singapore, again, a hospital I visited when I was giving a lecture there. Khoo Teck Puat Hospital in Singapore by Ramjam. And you can see they have a different climate, so they have more opportunities to do this. But the whole hospital was open to the exterior areas in different ways. And right in the middle of it, this lovely area where the musicians played each day. So health was seen as much, much wider than simply what the doctors and the nurses and the pills and the surgeries did on you. And this is the Royal Victoria Hospital in 1903. Completed, and it served the people of Northern Ireland terribly well for over a century and through some of the worst times. It was open until 2000 when we built the new Royal Hospital, and the wards were closed. But again, my wife was in one of those wards, and one of the single wards right up at the top there, and no windows again, no views out. Although you did get light in these wards, and these were called the Florence Nightingale wards. But no views, and again, bed spaces that were very close together, and infections that spread from patient to patient as a result. And this is another bit of research done led by Roger Ulrich, a group of people, showing the benefits of single bed wards, which at that time there were very, very few single bed wards being put into hospitals, a small amount. And I was pushing to get more and more single beds in. And the evidence I used in that push were the reduced infection rates because people don't get acquired infections from somebody next to the bed if there isn't a bed next to them. People get better sleep and recover better, and again, go home sooner. Confidentiality, speak to doctors, nurses, and to your relatives, and the ability of family to visit whenever they wanted to. So huge benefits in the single-use room, but that debate went on for a long time. So in health estates then, these were the four key areas that I set as the quality criteria that we were trying to achieve. Overall, an environment that was healing, that made people feel better about themselves, but was also effectively clinical. I use a phrase, islands of functionality floating in seas of creativity. So it had to be functional, but it also had to recognize people as individuals and human beings with needs. It had to be flexible to allow us to allow for change, because change is rapid in health. And it had to be embedded in communities so that health facilities were where they should be, and that they should be part of a community and enrich that community. And of course, it had to be sustainable in terms of all three: environmental, social, and economic. So what we wanted to do was get the right design of the right facilities in the right places. And that's what we started to push in health estates, against a system which didn't really have answers. And these are just some of the individual objectives that we would set for a project at the start when an architect was appointed. And you can see them there: optimism of daylight and views, links internal, external, minimization of corridors, particularly double loaded, variety of volume and space, human scale, lots of public realm rather than squeezed little corridors, creative use of materials, color, imaginative lights, use of artificial lighting, and fully integrated art and landscaping, which was a big thing that we pushed hard, and engineering services that don't look as if they're just added on, applied independently, but fully incorporated. So some of the policies that we did to drive that I led on. Well, first of all, John mentioned when I was president. When I came in as president in 1996, in my introductory speech, I stated that I wanted to set up the RSUA Design Awards. There were no RSUA Design Awards at that time. And out of that, Mervyn Black was a great assistance in doing this. And we also instigated the Liam McCormick Prize, which was first held in 1998, on my last event as president. And the second thing there is we introduced independent design reviews at key stages of all projects, so that architects who previously never had to show their work to others had to come up and present their work to people of renown in the profession. And you can see the sort of people I brought in there: people with really good reputations, national and international reputations. And they acted as part of the review. And we felt out of that, which was constructive discussion, that we always improved the quality of projects that came before us. And architects agreed to that, and it became a positive thing, although initially some architects were hesitant about having to show their work to other architects. The big thing, that I introduced a no fee bidding policy, and that we would set the fees in advance, and we'd use competitive design interviews to select. I did this following the Korean Hospital project, which had gone out to tender, including a fee tender, in which 6 of the largest architectural firms in the UK had all in their bid to win it bid fees lower than 2% for the project. And we knew you couldn't deliver a project like that to the quality that we wanted and put the time into it that it needed. And that was happening right across the country with the doing away of mandatory fee charges. So that was a huge thing, and health estates, I think, were on their own in so doing. We also introduced anonymous design competitions, and the Children's Hospital Extension won that, and won the first. Barry Todd won the first Liam McCormick Prize, his first Liam McCormick Prize in 2000 on that project. But we also did it for the major Royal Hospital itself as an anonymously judged design competition. Health estates then adopted this policy for art up to 1% of construction costs in 2000, even though we did run into political reaction to that, and we still managed to keep it. And then the 100% single bedroom policy, which I introduced and put to the board and got approved in 2006. And Northern Ireland was the first part of the United Kingdom to do so. And now all parts have followed, England the last to do so. And in 2003, we adopted this policy that every project has to have a design champion, and on the design team, who would have a passion for the project and be responsible for protecting it through the various processes of design development, as design frequently gets forgotten about when projects' costs and time become more critical. Now, I'm going to be showing you projects afterwards, so don't worry about this. I'm just building up to that. This is a diagram that I produced, which has been republished in several publications and books. And it's essentially about that little dot at the bottom there, the cost of design, roughly a tenth of the cost of the building. I would pay more for hospitals, but that's what roughly it was about. And really, the point was to say that if the more you squeeze that little dot, the more the cost of the building in use, the 50 to 100 times the capital cost, that grew, or the cost of the building grew, the cost of maintenance grew. And that was the bit that people were cutting and leading to the whole life cost of the project increasing dramatically. So I said, why would anyone do that? We need to get that bit right. And if you get the design right on a proper brief, on a proper cost basis, properly managed, and putting the resource into it that architects need to do, and looking at options, not trying to get out the first drawing because your fees don't allow you to do that. So that was a big issue. And I say this diagram has been reused, and in fact, still in one of the key issues in Canada and part of the Ontario design submissions. And then as part of looking at how we actually achieve better delivery, I devised a new model called performance-related partnering, PRP. We wanted to have a culture at the start of looking to deliver a quality project, put the right resources, the right process, and the right people into it. Design fees, as I said, set by the client, generally between 15 and 17% for the team. Selection of design teams solely on their creativity and demonstrable expertise. Selection of contractors against a maximum cost limit that they would have to deliver within, and turning that into a guaranteed maximum price. I wanted to protect the direct contractual relationship between the client and the architect. No design and build contracts, no innovation of design teams, which was very much being pushed at that time. The design, we felt, in terms of the content, form and quality of the project, which I call the what, needed to be established prior to the contractor becoming on board. And then once we had that established, the contractors would be invited to be involved in looking at some of the detailed issues and adding to the how, because some of the technical knowledge lies within the subcontracting supply chain, and to have them available was a huge benefit. And appointments under this process meant if you performed well, this is why it's called performance-related partnering, you then were open to being appointed for a series of 2 or 3 projects based on your performance in the previous one without competition. And that happened very successfully for a period of about 10 years when I was in charge. And that's what it looked like. We needed a more collaborative approach, the client retaining the relationship with the design team. We needed independent scrutiny of construction contractors signing off their own work. And we wanted earlier access by the design team to the supply chain technical knowledge. And we actually got lots of projects done, no claims, a non-adversarial longer-term relationship with good teams of contractors and designers. And as part of that, we were being pushed to do PFI. And again, I looked at PFI and devised a model called Exemplar PFI, or Smart PFI, which was used in not only Gelton Hospital and then Skinner Hospital. And it was presented to the Treasury by myself, who generally supported it. The RIBA promoted it. And subsequently, it has been widely adopted. It was across the UK when PFI was still being pushed. And just related to that, I thought it might be interesting. Having spoken on this subject and presented a paper in London, at which somebody from the Minister of Culture in France had attended, I was invited to present at the Grand Arche de la Défense in Paris in 2007 by the Ministry of Culture. Very lavishly entertained, mind you, by the Minister that day. But I did present my talk, and I was surprised 2 or 3 months later to get an invitation from the French Ministry of Culture to be a representative of the French Minister of Culture at the 2008 World Congress of Architecture held in Turin. And they wanted me to do the similar talk to the one I'd given them in Paris. And I did that, strangely enough, as I was coming out of the conference room, which was in this building in the old factory. I was just being converted into a lovely seminar conference centre. I met Sunan Prasad, who was then president of the RIBA, and he wondered what I was doing there, and I said, I'm French today. So it was a bit unusual. The last one there is just a slide showing that at that time people were taking interest in what we were doing in Northern Ireland and our new models. And Public-Private Partnership, which was a magazine which promoted PFI, actually has an article, you can just about see it in the bottom right-hand corner there, saying Northern Ireland performing better than PFI in England. So we were getting a wider acclaim. And from that, in terms of my career, I was subsequently invited to do present lectures and workshops on our approach to protecting quality through procurement in all parts of the UK and across a whole range of European countries. So you can see there, Canada, South Africa, and many of these countries adopted parts of our process. In Northern Ireland, I was challenged that setting fee levels was in conflict with European regulations, and that UK and Northern Ireland policy required the use of design and build. But I firmly resisted both those pressures and went separately and got QC advice in London, which confirmed that we were fully in compliance because we were still achieving what was the most economically advantageous, in that we were getting most for each pound rather than how few pounds we were paying. In 2013, the RIBA asked me to become what they called RIBA Procurement Champion, and I was able to support the principles I've been talking about on a much wider level in the UK. After I left the health estates in 2013, the people still came to me for lots of these, and that's why I happen to get a lot of client advisory commissions. And currently, at the moment, I'm engaged in a UK-sponsored group based on writing the competence standard for procurement among professionals. And the last aspect before I show you the buildings is the strategic planning. Northern Ireland was in a terrible shape. It is still in a terrible shape in terms of health, waiting lists, all of those things that I wrote in 1906 probably. They still stand today. Things haven't improved, unfortunately, significantly. In fact, they probably got worse. And part of that is due to budget and other reasons. But that was a report in 2001, which part of the objective is to keep people out of acute hospitals who should not or need not be there. And that was what we were trying to do. And this is a Codman Square Health Centre in Boston. I visited in 1998, and this inspired a lot of the thinking that I subsequently came in terms of the models I produced for our health service. When getting here, we got into a taxi which was driven by Russian emigres in Boston. And when we told them where we wanted to go, they said, "Are you sure you want to go there?" And I said, yes. He said, "That's called Murder Mile." So we naively went to the building in Murder Mile. But when we got there, we found this inspirational building, which was bringing all sorts of services that used to be in hospitals and community services together and helping a part of the city which was totally run down. I took a lot of learning from that, which I built into subsequent developments. And this actually is a reflection of a diagram that I drew on a KLM napkin on the journey back from America that year. And that formed the basis of our future planning of health service. I was able to sell this model in which more and more services are moving downstream into this area here, the CTCCs, where more and more services could be delivered closer to where people were, making them more accessible and taking the pressure off hospitals. And that was the intention. And the idea was that you moved outpatients, diagnostics and treatments, imaging from the acute sector more and more towards this area. And also, in terms of our hospitals, we needed to specialise for higher critical mass to allow centres of excellence to be developed. So it would lead to local hospitals becoming less acute in some aspects and fewer hospitals but doing better stuff because the smaller hospitals couldn't attract the consultants. So that was a plan, and it was adopted. This is the map of Belfast showing the plan, and the 7 smaller circles are Those are the level 2 facilities, the community health and care centres that we built. And we did a plan showing all of this for all of Ireland, Northern Ireland, sorry, across the 19 trusts. And a capital plan was produced which would deliver this over 5 to 10 years and required 42 of the centres to be built. We started in Belfast, and the first projects were completed in 2005. We presented to a conference. I presented to a conference in Budapest, and that led to major interest, on leading to me being asked to join the board of the European Health Property Network. And only a couple of years later, I was elected chair of that board, and that led to other connections on a world basis, to writing a chapter for the World Health Organization book, which was asked to help launch in Florida at a conference. And it led to all sorts of visits again, and across Europe, South Africa, a 5-lecture tour in Australia. So that all of that led from that first visit to Boston, where I saw this inspirational building. And I stood down as chair of UPN at the end of 2012, and as I decided to leave Health Estates in 2013 to do my own thing. And just out of interest, this is an article from a national newspaper in Canada, the Globe and Mail, sent to me by Ty Farrow, who's a leading Canadian architect, when he saw it in the paper. And I didn't know it was in the paper, but it just shows you how things get around. And this is me and Carlisle Health and Wellbeing Centre. And then the debate goes on and explains all about our trip to Boston and what we're trying to do and how we're setting a model that the rest of the world is seeking to follow. Unfortunately, that model wasn't carried on by the funding and others who followed behind, and we only started the process and never really delivered fully, and we're still in the process of delivering it. The Bengoa report is simply a development of this thinking. Now, I'm going to now show you, Chair, relief no doubt, some of the projects were delivered, and I have to say, by the great Health Estates team that I had, people around me. None of this would have happened without the great support I had in the people who worked with me in Health Estates and in their trusts that worked closely with Health Estates. We worked as in collaboration rather than master and servant, and of course by the excellent design teams and contractors that were competitively procured to work with us. So here's some of the projects. I mean, the Royal was the first project delivered under the procurement system under PRP, and Percy Thomas went on to do other projects on the side. This is the Mater Hospital. Again, a lot of art. Barry Todd's scheme. One I felt should have got an award, wasn't really picked up. Belfast Cancer Centre, again by Capita Architecture and Scott Wilson. Olney Gelfin Hospital, all Black and Douglas Waste JLM. And the PFI scheme delivered through the Smart PFI, or Exemplar PFI, which won the World Health Design Awards in Australia, which were held in Australia that year, and RIBA Awards again. Hollywood Arches. This was the first of the level 2 facilities by Pinoy and Prasad, working with Todd Architects, again an RIBA award scheme. And this is Carlisle, again one of the schemes I like, particularly like the interiors for this building. Breda Health and Wellbeing Centre, another RIBA award-winning project, and I think it came second in the World Design Awards. Beach Hall, these are the projects in Belfast, the level 2 projects, which were to help take the pressure off the hospital and deliver more services close to where people were. This is the Shankill version, and you can see the similarities in design, light, open space. This is Portadown. The first outside Belfast we did, which was done by Fancy, and this is David Morley, working with Hallback and Douglas. Scott, I'll just go back on this one, sorry. This is the Downpatrick Hospital again, which won an award by Scott Wilson, and this just shows the focus on art that we put into these projects. And this is Olsey House, another RIBA award-winning scheme done by Richard Murphy with RPP with Richard Murphy. And again, this was to bring people out of acute sector into the local community rather than in hospitals. This is the Ulster Hospital ward block, again by Avanti and KFA. Again, you can see the richness of the design, the materials used, the quality, the light, the softness of the building. Banbridge Health and Wellbeing Centre, again, Avanti Architects with Kennedy Fitzgerald, another RIBA award-winning project. This is Ballymena Health and Wellbeing Centre by Hoskin Architects. Unfortunately, Gareth Hoskins died, I think, before this was finished. He was a very talented Scottish architect. Omagh Hospital and Primary Care Centre, which combined a local hospital with the Level 2 Health and Wellbeing Centre, with 27 GPs in it, as well as hospital services. So a very interesting model, and again, a very nice building, RIBA award-winning. And North West Cancer Centre by O'Connell Mahan from Dublin. You can see light at all times. Well, then in 2016, all of a sudden, I got a phone call from the chief executive of Edinburgh City Council saying, would I be interested in doing a review and chairing an inquiry into the collapse of this building, which collapsed after 10 years. And despite the fact I hadn't really worked in that area, I felt the challenge was something I'd rise to. So I did all my analysis and studied how inquiries were run, went over, met him for an interview and was appointed. And this was a building where 9 tons of brick fell on an area where these kids would have been standing an hour later. If it had happened an hour later, there would have been multiple fatalities. And as I did my report, I discovered that more and more of these had happened, and that 5 collapses of walls in Scotland had happened during the 2012 to 2016 period, all for the same reason. And then finishing that, I'll come back to it in a minute, but finishing that inquiry, I was then asked to chair an inquiry into this building in Dumfries. It was an event centre, and it was virtually had to be rebuilt after 6 years. And all of them had the same defects: widespread failures and missing wall ties, head ties, widespread omissions of fire stopping, substandard work in many areas. And these were found throughout Scotland, predominantly in buildings procured using PFI and design and build. And what I said as one of my main points in my report was that over-reliance on self-certification by contractors, inadequate independent scrutiny of works, and failure to employ experienced clerks of works. And these are the 2 reports that were produced. And that's the Cole report that it's called the Cole report. I don't call it that, but it's called the Cole report that John Aubrey referred to at the start on the left there, and then the Dumfries report followed that a year later. And these led to significant impact right across the country. These are just examples of some of the gaps in fire stopping that we're seeing in the GG1 building. You can see massive holes in what were supposed to be firewalls. And here's some of the widespread lack of wall ties or lack of wall tie embedment, which was amazing to find out. Just some walls have no ties at all. And then, of course, in 2017, we had the same issue this time, but due to, again, all the fire compartmentation, the fire barriers, county barriers in the wrong place or upside down and not there. And in a building that had only one means of escape. And 72 dead, 70 injured, hundreds of lives affected. And the question we're all asking in the inquiry has just come out with who is responsible for looking after quality, and it appeared that nobody was. And then I was asked by the Scottish Government to look at how they could use our building standards to achieve safer quality. And at the same time, Judith Hackett was writing a report on for the following Granville. And both those reports shared very, very similar conclusions. And out of that, again, just to show you, how your life changes and your career changes, these were all the different groups. First of all, as an appointed member of the RIB Expert Advisory Group in Granville in 2017, and still sitting, that group is still running. We have succeeded in getting the second staircase been made a requirement in all multi-story buildings. You can see just how much time was taken up with sitting on these. Most of them were not paid commissions. Some of them were very, very well paid, but most of them were just working towards a general good. And the most recent one is in 2023, I was appointed by the RIB as a representative on the National Response Committee on the RAAC issues. And to final off, the final project that goes back to something I said at the beginning, when I found my colleague in a ward in a terribly depressing and unwelcoming ward in a Belfast psychiatric unit. And this is the new Belfast Acute Mental Health Centre, RPP and Richard Murphy again. And you can see maybe the difference in quality of spaces provided, lots of landscaping, all rooms with views of landscaping. And I thought about the different spaces that people could sit in, including garden areas, landscape areas, little meditation centres, and running water. So I think we have progressed from that initial bit, but there's still far way to go. So thank you. Thanks very much for listening.
John, thank you very much, John. And thank you for taking the time out of what is clearly a busy schedule to present to the RSUA this afternoon. I found it very interesting to hear that your architectural journey was much different than maybe what you first realised, and how different it may have been if your colleague at the time maybe wasn't going through what he was going through. But it does certainly highlight the diverse role that architects play in the built environment. And as you stated at the start of your presentation, you're as busy as ever. So your comprehensive legacy in the healthcare sector continues and is ever growing, and Northern Ireland is certainly better for it, as is the other parts of the world that you highlight in your presentation. And I certainly will take away the slide with the little yellow dot. I think it's really telling that design is just so important, but in terms of cost is minute in that slide. So if you're happy, John, I'd like to ask the members that if they have any questions on your presentation. So if I could open to the floor, please. Yes, Kieran.
John, thanks so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. I was actually doing a presentation yesterday myself, and I was in preparing for it. I was looking for that slide with the small circle, the larger circle, and the larger one again. But I had to make everybody in the room imagine that slide. So maybe after this, you can ping that one on to me for future use. A lot of your work, John, was obviously focused on health. Almost your whole your working career until this latter part was on health. How applicable do you see your procurement models for other sectors?
I think the principles hold. I think the problem, first of all, there's a problem with fee bidding. People still, aren't getting the resource necessary. And if you get a low fee bid, I win a job on that basis, you're under pressure from day one to give it to the lowest paid chap in the office. And despite the fact we all are professionals and we have a series of ethics, commercial interests emerge, and you have to keep your practice above, going. So I think there are real problems with the fee bidding and the level of fee bids that architects are prepared to make. I think we have to sell that message more than anything else. And the only way I think I took it away from people by saying, well, I'll set the fees, that there's not going to be fee bidding, and then let people compete on the basis of what they can offer for that fee in terms of quality. So I think that still applies. I think all the principles I talked about in terms of designing experiences for people, I think those apply to any building, whether it's a school building or a factory building or an office building. Light, as Louis Kahn wasn't talking about health buildings when he said, what he said. All of those issues I think still apply. And it's more about, I think, to some degree, architects lost the detail. They moved away from the detail. They tended to do just overall schemes and didn't have the time to develop the interior quality of spaces. Look, all the great architects, if you look at them, as Alvarado, for example, lighting fittings, door handles, chairs, all the bits that go into a building were thought of. We don't do that anymore. We can't afford to do it because people don't. But those are the things in the immediate environment where people are and working on a 8 hours a day or whatever, that affect how they feel about the work and make them more effective. So I think there's an awful lot to still work for. I think architecture isn't appreciated sufficiently by government. It does need somebody in there with a voice. I got to the level of deputy permanent secretary, so I had much more power than maybe people thought I should have had, and was able to still do things despite the fact that maybe the central guidance at the time was not supportive of what I was doing and was pushing design and build and fee bidding.
Thanks very much, John.
Thank you. Martin, you have your hand up there. So,
John, that was a wonderful overview of your work, and I think Northern Ireland owes you a big debt of thanks, because I think some of the healthcare projects that you managed to deliver here probably stand testament against anything that was built in Europe in the last 20 years. So I think that's an amazing legacy to leave. I must admit, looking from the outside in, one of the things that I thought that you pioneered, which seems now to be coming more and more to the fore, was the concept of the partnering or collaboration between designers and contractors. You were sort of championing early contractor involvement, 15 years ago, and they still, some of the government departments still have a problem with the consideration of early contractor involvement. But the works cost limits that you set, and the concept that while contractors were asked to price things, they were asked to price things on the understanding that you would still work with them during a period of time with your design team to make sure that the risk was driven out of the contract, and that when they committed fully to their costs, they could commit confidently that they could build it for that cost. I think that model, I know architects have probably over the years harked back and wanted to retain a sort of a love affair with the traditional, we design everything, builders build our design. But I think actually in the world we're in today, and certainly the buildings that you would have procured over the years, I think that's not realistic. You have got to expect or accept that a tremendous amount of detailed design resides in the supply chain. And your model, I thought, identified that, and was as much as you setting your fixed fees and all certainly was a tremendous thing that you did, and it certainly contributed to the quality. I think you shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the way you engage with the contracting organizations also really helped you deliver that quality. Now, that's just maybe an observation rather than a question.
Yeah. Okay, Martin, thank you. John, there's no other hands up, but I had a question just as you went through there. I was curious to know what the political concern was with introducing art.
I don't know if I should tell this story or not, but
that means you've got to tell it.
Yeah, well, it was a certain politician in Northern Ireland was on the news one day, And he said there was a waiting list for hip operations, as there are a waiting list for virtually every operation in Northern Ireland. And he had made a gross exaggeration of what had been spent on art in buildings. And we had said our policy was up to 1% of construction cost. That was there used to be a term 1% for art. Well, it was up to 1%. And we rarely would have spent as much as that, but we had art thought of from day one and to be incorporated into the building. And I think it was in Radio Ulster, and I was driving to meet my then minister, who was McGimsey at the time, and to meet him on the site to talk about new cancer centre. And he was listening to the same programme when this politician from an rival party said about this money should not be spent on art at all. This money should go for hips, and you could obviously understand that if you had a hip, but equally then you could say, well, let's forget about anything to do with quality in terms of building. And so when I arrived out, Jimsy asked me, have you this policy for art and 1%? I said, yes, I've had it for some time now. And he said, well, we'll have to stop. We can't have them saying this about it, So I then redefined art in terms of architectural expression. And I said that every architect should, in looking at the building, should be incorporating architectural expression, which is what the art was. If it's tile floors, if it's murals, if it's, whatever.
Yeah.
So we changed the policy to read that way, so that nobody could say we're actually spending it on art, but art effectively was because let's talk about it. Architecture at its best is an art form, so the best architecture is art, and yet we have been told, well, you can't express this in buildings. And right from day one, the best buildings in the world, art has been there, and the best hospitals in the world, art has been there. So it was an interesting discussion, but I still managed to maintain the focus on art with a slightly changed policy statement.
Okay, Alana.
Hi,
Afternoon,
yeah.
Alana.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the talk. Again, my interest was in the diagram regarding fees, and I was just wondering if you broke up that 1% or sorry 10% further into the traditional 4211 for the architect and mechanical and electrical and structural, or if it was just a rounded figure.
What we did was we asked teams to select themselves, so that I wanted people working with people they could trust, and they would have to pick good people, because if they picked a poor quality engineer, for example, for a health building, that team wouldn't be selected to go forward for the competition. But we didn't then define, but we asked people to declare how they were breaking down the 17% fee at the time, how they were breaking that down between the various disciplines. So it was self-selecting a team, because I wanted integrated teams, and they then had to break down. And generally, they did it in a broad, roughly the way you described there. But engineering in some hospitals would be more than in others, so it'd be appropriate that it be higher levels. So we didn't dictate that, but we wouldn't have accepted if it was the architects getting 15% and everybody else is getting 5 or something. So that was part of the bidding process.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
John, there's no other hands up, so I'm conscious of time. I'm sure you could do. Oh, Mr. Fox.
I just wanted to sneak one in for John around the line between the responsibility for the architect in ensuring quality and the responsibility for the contractor. This is sometimes the lines can be blurred. Where do you see the architect's responsibility stopping and it then being passed over to the contractor? That idea of, are you checking in on the contractor's work, and to what extent?
Yeah, I think again, many architects, unfortunately, are quite happy to be more conceptual designers rather than actually carrying projects through. And I think if you don't carry a project through, how do you know what your design is going to be like the next time when you're doing the detailing? There needs to be an understanding of construction, and that has fallen away from a lot of the training, a lot of the education at the moment. And I think people are now looking at that again, and particularly in light of Grenfell and the report that's just come out. But I would always insist that architects visit sites. The design and build process traditionally moves architects to the other side, and they're working with a contractor, and contractors therefore don't want the architect telling the client how poor quality the building's been built to or whatever. So, for example, I've done a lot of work, still doing work with the University of Glasgow. I'm involved in their last 5 major projects, and one currently at over 250 million. And in that, I recommended, because I advised them on their strategy, that while they were novating the architects to the design team, to the contractor at stage 4, that the architect would still be bound to submit direct reports on their inspections, which they must carry out at a minimum. I think it was fortnightly, we were saying in this particular case, and those reports go unamended to the design team, from the design team to the client as well as to the contractor, so that nothing is hidden. It's all out there up front, and that forces them to both to visit the site and to report on it. So a lot of the defects have been down to people not being properly resourced and not being enough clerk of works, and architects can't be held responsible for not, carrying out exhaustive inspections, but they must carry out a basic duty to look at it. And the new Building Safety Act, describes that very closely in relation to the principal designer role. So, yeah, I think we have to get back in there. I wrote an article for the RIBA Journal. I think I called it, Are Architects on site or out of sight? And that was a pun in terms of, we're actually disappearing and becoming less and less important. We need to be out there and looking on the site as much, because I'm afraid particularly young architects spend their time at computer rather than actually understanding what materials are and looking at materials and feeling materials and understanding how they work.
Okay, John, again, thank you very much. Very, very insightful. And as Martin said there, Northern Ireland and the healthcare buildings that you created are certainly making a difference. And it's great to hear that you still have the same enthusiasm and are still busy, and long may that continue. So I'm just going to sort of close up in terms of, if research has proven that natural light and connection to the outdoors in architecture can help us get better in healthcare situations, then surely it stands that well-designed buildings in all scenarios that are full of natural light and are connected to outdoor will help to keep us well. So on that note, keep on architecting and enjoy your weekend.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks again, John. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Bye-bye.